think this year's discussions really centered around the idea of how do you define multimedia as it's being produced today. Partially as we're trying to figure out what entries belonged in which categories. Many people entered in categories that ultimately we felt probably they didn't need to be in or should have been in a different category. And part of that was because of our categories being a little confusing, and I think part of that is just that the nature of the media is changing rapidly. I think the challenge this year was to start to refine what we were looking for, start to refine how multimedia relates to the larger mission of World Press. So we talked a lot about what makes up an online feature, what is more documentary than another, what is the definition of news, and how that applied to the entries that we received. Overall, the pool of applicants this year was very strong, and I think one of the strongest that I've seen over the years in various multimedia contests. I think the production values are much higher in general, but also the storytelling. The piece out of South Africa was probably the one that was most made the strongest mark early in the contest, and ended up winning in the online shorts category. What we liked about that was really the seamless transition between the video elements and the photography elements. The photography elements were first rate, just a great eye at work with a style that worked for the piece. But video was used where it made sense. Photography was used where it made sense to stop a moment, to allow you to kind of linger over a place or a person's face. It did all of that really, really well and had a wonderful narrative. When we first watched Too Young to Wed, we started to pick up on the nuances of both, their relationship and how they related to the people they were telling their story to. And this piece really understood that. And so the pacing, the balance felt very natural. There were places where the silence told the story, other places where you lingered on somebody's face and their eyes, or how their hands were positioned. All of those things were really important to the success of this story, and it became much more about the cumulative effect of how this story was told as opposed to the individual elements, which on the surface, again, could have looked very stereotypical. They were handled in a way that didn't feel like that at all, and it left us wanting to know what was going to happen next. I think the LA Times this year really kind of stood out in the sense that the pieces they entered showed a very clear direction that they're taking with producing multimedia content, video content for the web, blending it with photography, and really, I think, allowing most of their visual journalists to have a style which comes through the production as well as to tell good stories. Bitter Pills was what I think could be categorized as a very unusual look at a very common story, a very common problem, which is drug abuse, particularly abuse of prescription drugs, and told through a long-term commitment to work with a drug abuser. And the story through this character, through his eyes, and then through his transformation is really pretty incredible to hear. In fact, many of the scenes, we hear him and we see him, but we don't see him speaking. We see him in the moment, almost the moment that he's describing, and we almost kind of feel like we are inside his head. The photographers and visual artists who learn how to work with audio are the ones who will be successful. The projects that worked for us the best were the ones that were the most immersive, and audio is a huge element in that process of making something immersive for the viewer. The sounds of the street, the sounds of paper rustling, sounds of gunfire were appropriate, but also the sounds of silence. Those are the things that subtly help take us places. Having a voice, having a narrative is so critical to good storytelling in general, and particularly on the web where you are working often with a smaller window. People are looking at it on smaller screens, they're looking at them on cell phones, and to capture their attention, you really do need to have something which hooks them. And visuals by themselves are not often the strongest hook. The strongest hook is often the story that they're hearing, the tale that somebody is telling. The tools allow you to do a lot of things today, and the people who were probably the most restrained with the tools were the ones who were the most successful.